Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast, brought to you by the Chalkboard app. The top 400 RotoWire Prospect rankings are fully updated as of yesterday, Tuesday, August 26th. So as usual, I'm answering your questions about that update. You can use code YouTube15 to get 15% off your RotoWire subscription if you want to check out that top 400. The team top 20s are also fully updated. Those are about as robust as they're ever going to be at any point in the season, with all the recent draftees in there. And remember, you want to use that FYPD filter on the top 400 page. You can exclude all the FYPD players. There's 77 of them on there. But I know most of us play in dynasty leagues where you can't pick them up until your first year player draft. So use that feature to exclude those FYPD players if you're looking to make pickups now. And definitely make sure you're using the My Leagues feature as well on RotoWire. That's half the value right there, just quickly seeing the best prospects available in your leagues. Again, that code is YouTube15 to get 15% off those top 400 prospect rankings and the rest of the site. And I know I say this for each mailbag, but you guys really outdid yourselves with the questions this time around. I feel just really lucky to have such smart, savvy readers, and I definitely don't take that for granted, especially in the dog days of summer here. So thank you for all the great questions. We're going to start with a question from Eureka Rose. They say, I'd love to hear more details on the top of your board and what likelihood you think each player has of being a significant 2026 contributor. So, right at the top, Konnor Griffin of the Pirates clearly has the highest realistic fantasy ceiling in the minors, but I'm guessing he's not up until late August next year. Just for service time manipulation reasons. I hope I'm wrong about that. You never really know with the Pirates. I mean, I thought Bubba Chandler was going to win a job out of spring training this year. That obviously didn't happen. So I think just the service time manipulation reasons point to August 2026 for Griffin. But obviously, when you're talking about an elite talent like this, I wouldn't really rule anything out. Number 2 is Kevin McGonigal, the Tigers. Very relevant name for 2026. I think he has a chance to actually end up with the highest 2026 ADP of any hitting prospect, including Samuel Basallo. I would say Basallo's the favorite right now. But McGonigal, I think, is going to be up all season next year. I even think there's merit in Detroit calling him up for this year's playoff run. And if that happens, he'll end up going in the top 150 by March. I think he might still end up going in the top 150 by March, even if he's not up at all this year. But McGonigal could be a 5-category player as a rookie. The power, probably the weakest. Power and RBI, probably the weakest of those 5 categories as a rookie. But I just think you're going to see redraft players, dive in on McGonigal's stats and just really kind of fall in love with the safety and the upside in the profile. Number 3, Jesus Mate with the Brewers. First-round fantasy upside, but more of a 2027 name. Mate. Sebastian Walcott at number 4 of the Rangers. I think he's tracking towards a late August 2026 debut as well, but he's got enough experience at AA that it's possible Walcott shows up to spring training next year looking more ready for a first half debut. So that one's pretty fluid. I just think when a guy's got this much upper level experience and they're this young, sometimes they show up and it's just like, okay, he's ready now, but late August 2026 is when I'd expect Walcott to be up. Leo DeVries of the A's, probably the toughest ETA, just in terms of whether to go 2026 or 2027. I think it's kind of a coin flip whether DeVries is up in late 2026 or first half of 2027, but not a guy that I would be drafting in draft and holds or anything like that. And then Basallo, like I mentioned, he was the 13th catcher taken in the first high stakes draft of 2026, which I participated in last week and wrote up on the site. I expect Basallo to be getting drafted in this 10 to 15 range among catchers pretty much all off season. The Adley Rutschman trade rumors, there's moving pieces here, but we know Basallo is going to be up next year at the start of the year. He was brought up specifically now when they're not going to exhaust his rookie eligibility. So he's going to be on the opening day roster for the O's next year, presumably playing a ton, even if Rutschman's still on the team. But I think a Rutschman trade would push his ADP even higher. Then at number 7, JJ Weatherholt of the Cardinals. I think he should make the opening day roster next year. there shouldn't really be any service time downside to bringing him up this year, knowing that he's big league ready now. Obviously, if the Cardinals were playing for anything, I think he'd probably be up already. I think they just kind of want to see what they have in some of these other guys for evaluation purposes, but I still wouldn't be surprised if we saw Weatherholt before the end of the season, and I think he makes the opening day roster. I think they find a way to open up third base for Weatherholt, and if not third base, it'll be second base, but I think third base will be just fine. And he's long-term a 5 category guy. There's similarities to, like a Luke Keyshaw, maybe even like a Matt Shaw in terms of the fantasy outlay. But Weatherholt's numbers at AAA have just been ridiculous. The pitching is pretty watered down at AAA right now, but definitely a strong option for 2026. Walker Jenkins at 8 of the Twins, barely any experience at AAA. So I'm expecting him to head back there for a couple months before making his big league debut in June around the Super 2 cutoff. Bryce Eldridge of the Giants, I'm guessing he'll come into camp as the favorite to win the starting job at first base with Rafael Devers at DH. Very wide range of performance outcomes for Eldridge in 2026. We know the power, we know the strikeouts. I do think it maybe is slept on a little bit, just how impressive it is what he's doing for a player his size and his age. Those like 6'6" slugger types, they tend to kind of need a bit more time in the minors to work out the kinks. But Eldridge, one of the youngest players at AAA, having success getting to that power, obviously in a very hitter-friendly environment. But I think Eldridge will come to camp next year with a chance to win a starting job. Max Clark, I think he's tracking similarly to Walker Jenkins, should be at AAA to start the year, probably a couple months, gets the call around the Super 2 cutoff. Luke Keyshaw of the Twins, he should be an everyday second baseman for them next year. He was the 8th second baseman selected in that first high-stakes draft of 2026. Obviously a weak position, second base, but the market likes Keyshaw already. Then at number 12, Sal Stewart of the Reds. Obviously, he could still get the call this year. It's tough to say what the Reds are going to do. Like, I think expecting Sal Stewart to give you like a big bump over a month, it's probably not that likely, just because he might give back anything he gives you offensively, defensively, just given that it'll be his first exposure to big league pitching. But Sal Stewart, I think he's going to go to camp at least with a chance to win a job in spring training. He can play third, second, first, but it's going to be his bat that carries him to playing time. And Jett Williams at 13 of the Mets seems like another potential June call-up next year. He's played 19 games so far at AAA, factoring in last year as well. So I wouldn't rule out something sooner with Williams. And his defensive versatility, like maybe there's an injury that opens a path for him. But I would think June with Williams, just like with Clark and with Jenkins. And I'll cut it off there, but just, looking further down the top 25, Travis Bazzana, the Guardians, Aiden Miller, the Phillies, they should contribute some in 2026. And then obviously Jordan Lawler with the Diamondbacks, Carson Williams with the Rays are also some top 25 hitters who will be in the majors for most or all of next season. All right, let's go to Schmitty, who wants me to break down the tiers. Yeah, I know there's people that want there to be sort of a marker of where the tiers are on the update. I kind of prefer the current setup, just because I think the tiers would become outdated quicker than the next update would be live. And so it might just be like too much information for you guys. But I always give you the tiers right after the update. I know it'd be maybe preferable for you to be able to see it on your phone when you're scrolling the rankings, but something I'll consider. There's several things I want to do in the off season, so that's not necessarily the top of the list. But tier 1, Konnor Griffin, Pirates by himself. Tier 2, Kevin McGonigal and Jesus Mate, only 2 players in that tier. Tier 3, I've got it from Sebastian Walcott at 4 to Luke Keyshaw at 11. Tier 4, I've got Sal Stewart at 12 to Aiden Miller at 21. Tier 5, I've got Jordan Lawler at 22 to Kalen Culpepper at 43. Tier 6, I have Arjun Nimala at 44 and Emmanuel Rodriguez down at 85. So Pretty big tier there from 44 to 85. Then tier 7 at 86 got Hector Rodriguez of the Reds, all the way to 163 Max Anderson of the Tigers. So big tier there. And then another big tier, 164 Kendry Chourio of the Royals to TJ Nichols of the Rays at 242. And then it really opens up from there. So, for your players you think I omitted that you think I should have included, a lot of those guys you could value sort of in that 243 to 400 range. All right, let's head to a quick message from our sponsors. And then when we come back, I've got a question about Jesus Mate's speed. I've got a question about any concerns about Sebastian Walcott. So stay tuned here. Cash in on your MLB picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTOMLB. That's ROTOMLB to get $20 free with no deposit required. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. Okay, back with the late August 2025 top 400 update mailbag. Again, that top 400 is fully updated as of yesterday, so use the code YouTube15 to check that out on rotowire.com. Gabriel Garcia says Jesus Mate of the Brewers SB numbers this season. Icing on the cake or baked into his ranking at the beginning of the season. Mate, I think he's got 40 plus steals at this point. That was definitely not icing on the cake. Mate is one of the best athletes in the minors. So the 30 plus steal speed has been a projected part of the profile since basically he got, as soon as there was noise about him in the DSL last year, like we knew the speed was definitely a big part of the profile. The athleticism was a huge part of the profile. So we're expecting 30 plus steals from Mate in the majors. Yoel, and I think I got another question about this too, but basically, are you starting to get concerned about Sebastian Walcott of the Rangers? And I understand why I got multiple questions like this since he's been my number one overall prospect in the past. He's been at AA all season. He hasn't created a ton of buzz recently. That said, I'm not concerned about Walcott turning into a good big leaguer, and I didn't expect him to get to the majors and contribute this year. Like, not a guy I was drafting at all and like drafting holds or anything like that. So I'm not surprised to see that he's not going to get to the majors this year. I do think if he was destined to be like a Ronald Acuna, Bobby Witt type of, top 3, top 5 pick throughout his prime, he probably would have done better at AA than he has done this year, even when factoring in just how young he is relative to the competition he's facing. But even so, I think my main takeaway, just the fact that I got multiple questions about this, is that you should buy low on Walcott right now in dynasty leagues. 12 homers, 27 steals, 11.5% walk rate, 21% strikeout rate as a young 19-year-old. Like he just turned 19 in March and spent the whole year at AA, and he's up to 12 homers, 27 steals, great walk rate, great strikeout rate. I still think he's an elite prospect. He's been passed by Konnor Griffin, Kevin McGonigal, Jesus Mate. None of that's controversial, but I have absolutely no hesitation putting him at number 4. So not concerned about Walcott, but I think you could probably rule out the superstar outcomes. But I do think he could be a first round pick multiple times during his big league career in fantasy. Paul Max says, where do you see Jett Williams of the Mets playing? Shortstop, second base, center field for the Mets, or getting shipped to another team? I definitely don't see the Mets trading Jett Williams. My guess is that he's going to play center field for them by the middle of the summer. I just kind of look at their depth chart. It looks like outfield is going to be where they need Jett Williams more than the middle infield. But I think there could be something that happens where it's like, yeah, the best spot for you is going to be shortstop, or Francisco Lindor is going to miss like several weeks. So you're going to play shortstop for a bit. Like that's all in play, but I think center field is kind of the obvious spot for Jett Williams next year. And I think he's going to be up playing regularly by the middle of the summer. Joe Schmuckatelli says Josue De Paula of the Dodgers is outside the top 25. Are you down on him? Well, De Paula went from number 21 to number 26 on this update, which seems natural just given that he's done nothing to improve his stock over the last few months. De Paula has now logged 140 games in the Midwest League, including last year. So 140 games at one level while being 30% better than the average hitter in that league the entire time. That tells you that he's got stuff to work on besides just the hitting aspect of things. Like you don't keep a prospect at one level for 140 games when they're 30% better the entire time if they're not working on stuff like defense. And De Paula getting the ball in the air more regularly is something that he needs to do as well. So he's, it's just kind of we're waiting for him to get to AA. Like we're not learning anything about De Paula right now, so that's why he's just sort of stagnating in the ranks. And there's lots of guys that are improving their stocks while he's just sort of sitting there, just doing what he's been doing for the past year plus. So I mean, I'm not down on him, but I just didn't see any reason to just like leave him up there while guys are improving their stock around him. And I only dropped him 5 spots, so doesn't even have a down arrow. Schmitty says, has there been any update about Mike Sirota of the Dodgers knee injury? Does he need surgery? Yeah, Sirota, he's done for the year after sliding into a base and injuring his knee. I think we'd probably have learned by now if he tore his ACL, but that's not a given. Like it's not a guarantee we would have heard by now. I think they probably would have said something if it was a torn ACL, but he'd seem like a decent Arizona Fall League candidate if it's a more minor injury and it's just one of those things where they just need the swelling to go down. So if he's excluded from the AFL rosters, I think that could be a tip-off as to the severity of the injury, but I have not heard anything on just what exactly is going on with Sirota's knee injury. Sox Stocks is curious regarding my first base ranks. Josue Briceno of the Tigers, he says, seems quite low. Am I worried at all about his profile? He had an adjustment period to start AA, but has picked it up this month. Yet Ralphy Velazquez of the Guardians has seemingly jumped him on the back of a quick start at AA. I've got them back to back. I've got I think they're at like 54 and 55 on the rankings. Velazquez is 8 months younger than Briceno Velazquez has just basically been the hottest hitter in the mid minors this summer. He's got a OPS over 1,000 since July, and Briceno has a OPS of 748 since July. But I've got him back to back. Like it's just kind of a nod to just how insane Velazquez has been lately, and he's younger than Briceno, so I just felt fine putting him one spot ahead, but they're both in a tier from 44 to 85. So if you wanted to value Briceno a bit higher, Velazquez a bit lower, I think that's fine. But they seem very comparable to me. Beerbot, maybe a few words on the Carter Jensen of the Royals double up arrows. He's got to be the next guy in line after Salvador Perez now, right? The bad news for the Royals is they've surrounded Bobby Witt and Michael Garcia with a bunch of bat first / bat only prospects. And Jensen, I think, fits more into that bat first bin. However, given that Perez has already played 57 games at a combination of first base and DH this year with Jensen not on the roster, I'd assume we see Perez play even more away from catcher next year. So, for Jensen's fantasy profile, like it's pretty exciting since he's got seemingly several paths to providing value, including with his legs on the bases. I don't think he's going to be like a Dalton Varsho or Agustin Ramirez type of base stealer for a catcher, but I think he could be one of those like 7-8 steals per year in a healthy year type of guys. But Jensen's 59.1% hard hit rate at AAA is absolutely elite. It makes sense if you look at the production he's had. He's also got a 35% ground ball rate at AAA. So getting the ball in the air, hitting the ball incredibly hard, pretty good combination. Has a OPS of almost 1,200 over the last 2 months. I think he's going to hit, more around like 225 as a rookie, but then it could be one of those things where it's just a slow build from there and he kind of levels out as like a 245, 250 hitter. So really nice potential roto player. Like the defense, from what I know, isn't expected to be amazing, but that hasn't stopped the Royals in the past. So I think Jensen is certainly one of the most exciting catching prospects in the minors. Could hit 20 plus homers as early as next year. And I think he's got the potential to be a top 10 fantasy catcher throughout his prime. So just been a fantastic couple of months for Carter Jensen of the Royals. Camposit says, what do you think is going on with Cam Collier of the Reds? His thumb injury seems to have sapped him of his power. Think he'll get it back? Well, I think you nailed it with the thumb injury. Really none of Cam Collier's non-power metrics are all that concerning when factoring in his age and level, but he's obviously not hitting for enough power this year. So I'm giving Collier a bit of a mulligan. I'm leaving him in this tier that stretches up to 85. But I was higher on Collier coming into the year, so I understand if you're willing to be, or you're less willing to be patient with him. I just think he still has, sometimes I get that question of like, which prospects in the minors could hit 30 homers in a year, 40 homers in a year. Like Cam Collier is still on the short list of guys to me that could hit 30 plus homers in a year, realistically, throughout their prime. So he's still just 20. It's his first taste of AA, and it's kind of an injury affected season. So I'm giving Collier a bit of a mulligan. I assume the power comes back in a big way next year. But like I said, I understand if you're willing to be, or less willing to be patient with him. Dale Teeks, and I actually got a few questions about Edward Florentino of the Pirates. I honestly thought last update was kind of the Edward Florentino update, just because he was re-entering the list at number 32 overall. But he's unquestionably been the buzziest dynasty prospect of the summer. So I understand the interest. And there's just, a couple guys, Dale Teeks, St. Louis Perfectos, kind of wondering if he's really special enough to be sort of in this top 20 range. I think, Florentino is doing stuff in the complex league and at single A that nobody else is doing this year. None of the 18-year-old prospects ranked below him are doing this, that's for sure. And, an 86% contact rate and a 5.4% swinging strike rate for an 18-year-old at single A, who is also been the most productive 18-year-old hitter at single A with a 154 WRC plus. I mean, it's just like his statistical case is kind of infallible, Florentino. So it's more just sort of how much do you want to kind of regress him going forward, looking ahead to next year. I had a question. One guy was just sort of, how does he compare to like Vinny Pasquantino and Kyle Manzardo? And I thought that was curious, just because I don't think they're comparable at all. But I do know like Florentino has still played some first base this year, but he's also played 51 games in center field. So like I'm not comparing Florentino to first baseman. I'm comparing him to toolsy outfielders of the past. And I'm not comparing him to Julio Rodriguez as a hitter, just because they're actually quite different hitters. Florentino's a elite lift and pull hitter, and Rodriguez has never been a big air pull guy. but I do think they're similar. They have similar body types. They're both like 6'4", over 200 pounds. And they both face questions like Julio Rodriguez. I remember like seeing him in the AFL, and I like a light kind of went on like, yeah, this guy's actually going to be a 5 category guy. He's going to run a lot. Like he's pretty good at it. And he gets good jumps. His height helps him with stealing the bases. It's just like a longer slide, So it was clear to me around then that Julio was going to be sort of this 5 category guy. People still doubted around then whether he was going to be a center fielder or, that there were definitely Julio Rodriguez doubters and skeptics before he came up. And like, I think there's some similarities there with Florentino where like he's getting compared to first baseman. There's the Pirates are weirdly playing him a little at first base, even though the vast majority of his starts have come in center field, a few in right field as well. But I think at worst he ends up in right field, and I wouldn't even rule out him ending up in center field. And, I think he's going to keep stealing bases, whether he maintains 20, 25, 30 steal speed. That's to be determined, but I think Florentino at least is going to be like a 15 to 20 steal guy early on. Just what he's doing as a hitter is really the most important thing, though. It's not the speed is almost sort of like icing on the cake to the question earlier about Jesus Mate. It's really what Florentino's doing as a hitter that has him up here in the top 20, and then you throw in the speed and it's just more exciting. But I couldn't really make a good case for ranking him lower just based on how good he's been this year and factoring in the age to level. Also had a question from Phil Kramer, who said he's been seeing some analysts call Florentino this year's Jackson Chourio. I think that's a good comp if you're just talking about the rise in value between their first and second pro seasons and the time in the year that it happened. But I don't think Chourio and Florentino are comparable really at all as players. Like Florentino's probably got 50 pounds on Chourio at the same age. He's got like 4 or 5 inches on Chourio at the same age. And Chourio's always, even to this day, his biggest flaw is just how aggressive he is at the plate. And like I said, Florentino, swinging strike rate below 6%, pretty ridiculous. So I get the comp in terms of just their prospect sort of value charts have similar sort of starting at the bottom and then just shooting up in that first full season. Ral Kipkin says, can we trust Pirates development now? So a lot of interest in just sort of the Pirates and Edward Florentino. And I think it's a tough question because we wouldn't be asking if we can trust Pirates development if it weren't for 2 players, Konnor Griffin and Edward Florentino. Those 2 players exist, but those 2 players might just be good enough that they would have thrived in almost any organization. I also think they bungled the Bubba Chandler thing this year. I think he should have been promoted around May. And like you could see examples of like Bobby Witt becoming Bobby Witt in the Royals organization. Like, does that mean the Royals developed Bobby Witt, or was Bobby Witt just always going to be this good? I think it might be kind of more of that with Konnor Griffin and Edward Florentino. It's just too small of a sample size. It's not like they've got just like 5 or 6 breakout prospects in full season ball, or breakout hitters in full season ball. They don't. They just have. It's still kind of a pathetically weak system for how long they've been bad. Another Pirates question from a friend of the pod, Eddie Almager. And Eddie wants to know about Tony Blanco of the Pirates. Probably wants me to justify where I've got Tony Blanco of the Pirates ranked. Eddie says the 80 grade power is so damn fun, but his contact metrics are pretty much bottom 10% in A-ball. Is this ranking in the hopes that he progresses there? Is early career Joey Gallo the ceiling? And what's the over-under at for the number of years he's an everyday player? So I agree about the power being so damn fun and the risk being extreme. And I think I'm just really glad someone asked a question about Tony Blanco, because I think this is a classic example of you just need to be aware of the type of prospect you're rostering. And I know Eddie is aware of what Blanco's pros and cons are, but just to like anyone listening, you want to know what type of player you're considering picking up. And I think you have to know with Tony Blanco, odds are you're not even going to get anything out of him. Like I would say it'd be safe money to just short Tony Blanco's big league career. But I think there's got to be room in Dynasty to gamble on players like Blanco, especially in leagues where you're rostering 20 to 30 prospects. You could maybe argue I bumped him 50 spots too high, 100 spots too high. I definitely see that argument, and I agree that it's a very, very concerning hit tool. But power like this is just so hard to find. He's still young enough that the range of outcomes, I don't think it's quite as narrow as just like Joey Gallo or non-big leaguer. I think a Joey Gallo type of career is probably better than the median outcome for Blanco. But I also think, he could have a Chris Davis of the Orioles type of Rangers and Orioles fame. Chris Davis, he could have that type of run where he's a sought after fantasy first baseman for 3 or 4 years. It'll be a shorter prime, but I think he could be one of those guys where he's a high strikeout, 40 plus homer hitter. But yeah, like I think you just have to know with Blanco, it's probably not going to work out, but it's also just like you don't find guys getting to this type of game power. It's just very hard to find. And it is 80 grade power, and he's getting to it regularly. It's just coming with a crazy amount of swing and miss. So we'll see what happens with Blanco in the coming years. But I think he's such a fun prospect to roster. Like, maybe if you take the fun aspect out of this, I have him 50, 60, 70 spots lower. But glad someone asked about Tony Blanco. Gabriel Garcia says, how bricked up should we be about the way Elian Pena of the Mets has turned his season around? Was this power expected given how much the Mets signed him for? No, I don't think so. I thought this was definitely, it had the feel of one of those signings where the player's value maybe peaked at age 14 or 15 and the bonus was agreed to 18, 24 months before Pena signed. And then, they go on and they just kind of underwhelm compared to the bonus. That you see that happen every signing period. Multiple guys fall into that bin. But Pena is obviously much better than that. But I think the hit tool is the one thing I thought would be good to decent right away in the DSL. And then I just didn't think there was going to be a ton of power or speed. And I thought the body was going to eventually kind of go in the wrong direction, and it would basically just be a hitter who wasn't giving you anything else. But the fact he's got 9 homers with 21 steals, while even exceeding my expectations with the hit tool, is pretty exciting. I mean, he doesn't, like, if he ends up being an above average to plus hitter, he only has to hit 15 to 20 homers, 10 to 15 steals, and we'll be pretty happy. And I do still think Pena is more floor than ceiling. To the extent a player that's only played in the DSL can be a high floor player, but like I'm not envisioning Elian Pena being like a top 10 prospect in a year. I think he's more of a floor than ceiling guy, but I think he's shown that he's just more, he's as advanced or more advanced than expected, and he's more toolsy than expected. So we'll see how the power and speed does when Pena comes stateside next year. Everyday normal guy says, what is a realistic ceiling for Dauri Fernandez of the Guardians? Do you see him becoming a top 50 prospect? So guys like Fernandez who hit for a bit more pop than expected in the complex league are very tough to project because the pitching is so bad. The conditions are so favorable. It can often be a false positive when one of these sort of hit over power guys hits 6-7 homers in the complex league. A lot of times they go to single A and then the power kind of dries up, or they go to high A and the power kind of dries up. But obviously Fernandez has the hitting, the running, the fielding, like that's all going to work in his favor. So if Angel Ganao of the Guardians can climb up near the top 50, which he has done in the past, he's down a bit after he's kind of dealing with a potentially lost season, I think, too, just due to injury and the rigors of Double A. But like Fernandez, has all those sort of same traits as Gannau did. So top 50 wouldn't surprise me by the end of 2026, especially if Fernandez gets to single A and he's, if he's got like a 155, 160 ISO at single A next year, then he will be kind of tracking towards being a top 100 and then top 50 prospect potentially. All right. H. Sampson says double up arrows on Kendry Chourio, pitcher of the Royals, 17-year-old pitcher of the Royals, I might add. How long before he's top 50 to top 100? Just a matter of checking boxes for higher levels. His motion looks effortless in the command. I'm sure you're already aware. Very intriguing prospect. So yes, Chourio is extremely fun, extremely exciting. Opened the year in complex ball, quickly got the bump to single A as a 17-year-old. He has a 56-4 K to walk in 44 1/3 innings. So just 4 walks in 44 1/3 innings. Pretty absurd. And I definitely agree with your evaluation about the effortless delivery. And I would say you're kind of right. It's a matter of checking boxes, but it's a matter of staying healthy enough to check the boxes. Like I don't really have much doubt that Chourio would check the boxes if we just turned injuries off. But, even if he just needed, like he could need Tommy John surgery next year and I would push his ETA back 2 years. So just very difficult to figure out where to slot a 17-year-old pitcher who's dominating the lower levels. You could probably argue, like, look at where Cam Collier ranked, like just inside the top 100. Look where Braylon Doty of the Guardians is ranked. He's like inside the top 150. Maybe Chourio should be up with those guys. I gave them a bit more credit for the amount of time they've logged at single A. And I think Collier even flashed at a higher ceiling than Chourio. But, if I had to guess, Chourio will be in that 50 to 100 range around the late May update next year. But it could happen faster than that. It could not happen at all. Pitching prospects will break your heart. And right now, Kendry Chourio is living a charmed life, but, could go in a variety of directions from here. Aaron Stoltenberg says, at this time next year, give me your top 5 overall and top SP prospect. So late August 2026. Here's my projected top 5 prospects. Konnor Griffin of the Pirates, Jesus Mate of the Brewers, Leo DeVries of the Athletics, Luis Pena of the Brewers, and Edward Florentino of the Pirates. So 2 Pirates and 2 Brewers and an Athletics prospect in there. There's a chance Konnor Griffin's graduated by then. I don't think there's a chance that Mate, DeVries, or Pena or Florentino have graduated by then. So I think at least 4 of those 5 would be my projected top 5. I think Konnor Griffin, more likely than not, he's still eligible, but he might not be. Honorable mentions for that top 5. Roch Chalowski at UCLA. I think he's going to be just one of the more prized FYPD prospects in recent years in next year's class. And I would expect to slot him into my top 10, potentially my top 5. And then Bryce Rayner of the Tigers, I think, don't forget about him. He could be top 5 a year from now. And Edward Quintero of the Dodgers, I think, also honorable mention worthy there. And then my top pitching prospect a year from now, that's much trickier. I went with Cade Anderson of the Mariners, but it really could be any of those top college arms from this year's draft. It could also be Seth Hernandez, the top high school pitcher in this year's draft. It could be Ryan Sloan. Cade Anderson and Ryan Sloan of the Mariners, like I'd consider taking them as a strong combo, one of those two to be the number 1 SP prospect in late August 2026. But I think Cade Anderson's a safe bet to be a top 5 pitching prospect a year from now if he hasn't exhausted his eligibility, which is also a possibility with Anderson. But very, very tough, obviously, to project the number 1 pitching prospect a year out. I don't think anyone was projecting Joe Tong a year ago to be the number 1 pitching prospect right now. I didn't even, yeah. Maggie, which prospects outside your top 50 could be top 5 or top 10 this time next year? So for this question, I always exclude pitchers, never projecting a pitcher to be a top 10 prospect. And I exclude most or all of the older position players. It's usually guys that just don't have that large of a sample or are so young that it's kind of an obvious ascension. So here are my players outside the top 50 that I think could be top 5 or top 10 a year from now. So Charlie Condon of the Rockies, Alfredo Duno of the Reds, Emil Morales of the Dodgers, Andrew Fisher of the Brewers, Cam Collier of the Reds, Gavin Feen of the Rangers, Caleb Bonnemer of the White Sox, Juniker Caceres of the Guardians, and Josue Gonzalez of the Giants. All right. Hampson says, who is your favorite Dodgers prospect outside of the top 100? This one's easy. Charles Davalan. They took him, I think, at 44 overall in this year's draft. I know I've got Alex Freeland ranked ahead of Davalan. They're both outside the top 100, but I'm a huge Davalan fan, and he's just a year or two away behind Freeland, which is why he's ranked lower. But Davalan is a classic, better in real life than fantasy prospect. He's going to be in left field or at second base because of his fringe average arm, but I think he could be a 20 to 25 homer guy, 10 to 20 steal type of leadoff hitter. My only real knock on Davalan is that he might sit against lefties early on, just because it seems like anyone other than Roman Anthony gets platooned if you're a lefty when you first come up. But I think Davalan he's going to be a mega FYPD target for me this year. So easy call there. All right. That'll do it, I think, for this mailbag episode. I do have a couple more questions I got to get to in the article tomorrow. That'll go up tomorrow morning. I got another question from Maggie about just orgs that are trending up or down. I got a question from Gordy just about Cam Smith compared to Noelvi Marte, Kobe Mayo. So those will be in tomorrow's mailbag article. But again, YouTube 15, if you want to check out those top 400 prospect rankings, which were updated yesterday, that'll get you 15% off. And this has been the RotoWire Prospect Podcast, brought to you by the Chalkboard app.